The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast plain of shimmering blue under blazing sun. There were no gulls, no sails, no clouds, just water and sky and Ezra's tiny fishing boat drifting far from the bustle of any harbor. The boat, a dented old vessel named the Marlin's Wake, creaked softly in protest against the tide. It wasn't made for deep-sea fishing, but Ezra wasn't fishing for profit. He came here for solitude. Ezra had become a ghost of himself over the years. Grief had hollowed him out like driftwood. Once a university literature professor, he had thrown everything away, his books, his suits, his job, after the car accident that took his wife, Lila. Fishing had become his monastic routine, and the ocean his sanctuary. That morning, he hadn't planned to go far, but a strange pull had brought him deeper and deeper into the sea. He didn't notice how far he'd drifted until the coast disappeared entirely. By then, the sun had risen high, and a thin haze of heat rippled across the horizon. He sipped from his dented canteen and cast his net, the motion mechanical and unthinking. Then, something stirred in the distance. Not a wave or a school of fish. A thrashing, violent, erratic. Ezra squinted, his calloused hands gripping the sides of the boat as he leaned forward. "Whale," he muttered. "Shark." But it wasn't the familiar arc of a dolphin or the jagged fin of a predator. It was fur, a mane. Ezra's heart hammered in his chest. That wasn't possible. A lion was drowning in the middle of the ocean. The sight defied all reason. A fully grown African lion, massive and golden, was flailing in the deep sea like a nightmare pulled from a fever dream. Its muscular limbs splashed violently, its mane soaked and plastered to its skull. Its amber eyes were wide with desperation, nostrils flaring, claws scratching at the surface of the water as if trying to climb out of a bottomless pit. Ezra's first reaction was disbelief. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, looked again, but it was still there. The lion's movements were growing sluggish, heavy with exhaustion. It couldn't last much longer. Ezra had seen strange things at sea. Glowing plankton, abandoned ships, even a drifting grand piano once. But this was beyond anything he could rationalize. He could turn the boat around and sail away, tell himself it was a hallucination caused by the heat or lack of sleep. But he didn't. Instead, he started the engine and veered toward the creature, his hands trembling. "Don't be stupid," he muttered aloud. "It's a lion." But he didn't stop. As he neared, he realized the lion wasn't aggressive. It wasn't roaring or snarling. It was dying. Its head sank below the water, only to rise again in a final gasp for breath. Ezra's instincts took over. He grabbed a thick rope from under the deck and tied it to a rusted metal cleat on the boat's edge. Carefully, he threw the loop into the water, praying the lion would understand, or at least become entangled. The lion's paw swiped at the rope. Missed. Again. This time it caught. Ezra pulled with all his might, muscles screaming. Inch by inch, he brought the beast closer, the boat tipping dangerously under the shifting weight. The lion's eyes met his, and something passed between them. Not fear, not threat. A shared desperation. With one final heave, Ezra pulled the lion partially onto the boat, its front half resting on the edge, hind legs still in the water. It coughed, gasped, collapsed, soaked, shivering and breathing heavily. Ezra stared at the beast, inches away from its massive jaws. "What in God's name are you?" he whispered. The lion didn't answer. It only closed its eyes. The boat drifted aimlessly, its engine silenced, its mission forgotten. Ezra sat opposite the lion, a battered first aid kit on his lap, unsure whether to open for himself or the animal. Neither moved much. Hours passed in strange silence. The lion's breathing was shallow but steady. Its chest rose and fell with a rhythm that mirrored the sea's own. Ezra wrapped a tarp over its body to help keep it warm. He'd seen enough animals to know that wet fur and ocean wind could kill. He couldn't believe how peaceful the creature looked. Up close, the lion seemed older, its fur flecked with gray. Scars lined its flank, and one ear was notched. This was a warrior, no circus pet or escape zoo attraction. A wild animal. But how had it ended up here, miles from the nearest continent? Ezra rummaged through his rations and slid a tin of sardines across the floor. The lion sniff hesitated, then devoured the contents with a soft growl. Guess you're not too proud for canned fish, Ezra muttered. He spoke to it like a passenger, like a friend. Perhaps it was the loneliness of the sea or the strangeness of the event, but something inside him softened. The lion was no longer a wild beast. It was a mystery, a burden, a sacred task handed to him by fate. Night fell. Ezra didn't sleep. He sat against the side of the boat, staring up at stars. He thought of Lila and how she used to believe in signs, omens, the sacred language of dreams. He had always laughed at her for it. But now, with a lion snoring softly on his boat, he wondered if she had been right. By morning, the lion stood, not tall or proud. Its legs trembled under the weight of its own body, but it stood. Ezra awoke with a start, heart pounding, unsure whether to fear for his life or cheer for creature. But the lion didn't growl. It simply looked at him, then toward the sun rising behind the waves. Ezra nodded, slowly rising to his feet. "I'll get you to land," he said. It took hours to turn the boat around and head toward the nearest island, a stretch of jungle-covered land he remembered from previous voyages. It was uninhabited, rugged, wild, perfect for a lion that didn't belong in this world, yet had no other place to go. As the shoreline emerged from the fog, the lion perked up. It moved at the bow of the boat, mane fluttering in the wind, its eyes alive with something Ezra couldn't name. Not joy, not fear. Purpose, maybe. Ezra beached the boat in the shallows, jumped into the surf, and guided the lion as it stepped onto solid ground. Its paws sank into sand, unsure. Then firmer. Then it walked. Ezra followed it inland until the trees closed around them. The lion paused, turned, looked back at him. A moment hung between them. Man and beast, savior and saved, two beings torn from their natural worlds and thrown into each other's paths. "Go," Ezra whispered. "Be wild again." The lion gave a low rumble, not quite a growl. Then it vanished into the jungle. Ezra stood there a long time, long after the roar of leaves had gone silent. Ezra stayed on the island for several more days, though his mind was never truly at rest. He had brought the lion to safety, and yet something lingered. The creature was gone, vanished into the jungle, but the act of saving it had left an indelible mark on Ezra's heart. It felt like a turning point, an end to one chapter of his life, and the quiet beginning of another. Still, his soul yearned for the ocean, the only constant companion he had left. He returned to his boat, now anchored a little way off the shore, and started the engine. As the boat moved away from the island, a wave of relief washed over him, but so did an unsettling emptiness. He had been a man without purpose for so long, lost in the vastness of the sea, yet the encounter with the lion had sparked something inside him, something he could not ignore. As he sailed farther from the shore, Ezra's eyes drifted to the horizon, and for the first time in years, he felt something akin to hope. The sea, once just a place of escape, had transformed in his mind. It was not just a refuge anymore. It was a bridge, a connection to the unexpected, the unexplainable, the wild. The boat sped to the water, and as the coast disappeared from view, Ezra couldn't help but glance back once more. He wasn't sure why, but he felt a pull, an invisible thread that kept him tied to the land, to the jungle where the lion had disappeared. It was an odd feeling, as though something was waiting for him, something he needed to return to. Weeks passed since Ezra's encounter with the lion, and the isolation of his days at sea had begun to creep back into his bones. He had resumed his usual routine, fishing, reading, watching the slow procession of the stars, but the weight of that encounter still pressed on his mind. It had been something beyond ordinary, beyond his understanding. One quiet evening, as he was preparing to cast his net, something strange happened. A sharp wind swept through the boat, sudden and forceful, causing the waves to pick up and churn in ways they hadn't before. The temperature dropped, and Ezra shivered, sensing an odd change in the air. He felt a presence, not visible but unmistakable. It was as if the very world around him had shifted. "Just a storm," Ezra muttered, but even he didn't believe his own words. The ocean had always been kind to him, steady and predictable, but this felt different. The wind howled, and for a moment it felt as though the very sea was calling out to him, urging him to turn around. He squinted into the horizon, his heart racing, and then he saw it, a shape in the distance, something large breaking through the waves. At first, he thought it might be another ship, but the shape moved too fluidly. It rose from the water like a great beast, its form cutting through the fog. The image was unmistakable, the silhouette of a lion's head. Ezra's pulse quickened as the shape came closer, growing larger, and then it dawned on him. The lion had returned, not to the boat, but to the sea itself. It was swimming, its powerful body cutting through the waves with ease. Ezra was frozen, a sense of awe and disbelief overtaking him. His mind raced with questions. How could the lion have survived at sea for so long? Was this a sign? Was it calling to him? As the lion drew closer, Ezra instinctively threw a rope into the water, hoping to pull the creature to safety, though a part of him knew it would not need saving. It was no longer a creature lost and drowning, but a being at home in the ocean, part of it now, as wild and free as the sea itself. The lion reached Ezra's boat, but it did not clamber aboard as it had before. Instead, it stopped just short, its massive body buoyed by the water, its eyes locking onto Ezra's with an intensity that could not be mistaken. There was no fear in those eyes, only recognition. The lion seemed to acknowledge him, not as a savior, but as an equal, a fellow traveler in the wild, untamed world. Ezra stared back, his breath caught in his throat. He hadn't imagined it. The lion's return was not a coincidence. It was a message. Without warning, the lion let out a deep, resonant roar that echoed across the water, bouncing off the distant cliffs and rising into the evening sky. It was not a cry of aggression, but a call, a summons to something greater, to something both Ezra and the lion had come to understand in the vast silence of the sea. Ezra's heart pounded in his chest as he stood motionless, waiting for the lion's next move. But the creature simply turned and swam toward the horizon, its powerful strokes cutting through the waves with ease. It left no trace of its passage behind, as though it were returning to a place of its own, somewhere Ezra could not follow. And just like that, the lion was gone, swallowed by the ocean. But Ezra felt no loss, no sorrow. Instead, he felt a deep sense of peace, as if he had witnessed something sacred, something profound. He had saved the lion, but in doing so, it seemed the lion had also saved him, reminded him of his place in the world, his connection to the wild and the unknown, the same wildness that still pulsed through his veins. The next few days were quieter than usual. The strange wind, the lion's return, these were things Ezra could not explain, but he no longer sought answers. In the quiet of the boat, as he cast his net and watched the stars flicker overhead, he had come to understand that some things didn't need explaining. Some things just were. He knew now that the ocean had more to offer him than just fish. It offered the possibility of something deeper, a truth that lay beyond human comprehension. The lion was a part of that truth, a living embodiment of the wild forces that govern the earth, a reminder that there was magic still left in the world, even in the most unexpected places. Ezra didn't return to shore. He didn't need to. The sea had become his home, just as it had become the lion's. And in his heart, he knew that the lion was out there somewhere, free in the wild, living as it was meant to live, just as he was. And in that knowing, he found the strength to move forward, on the water and in life. He had come to the sea seeking solace. But what he found was something far more powerful, connection, to nature, to the mysterious forces at work in the world, to the lion and to himself. And that was enough. Weeks slipped into months as Ezra continued to sail, living a life that was a mixture of solitude and reflection. Each day seemed like a mirror of the last, but in the stillness of the ocean, he found comfort. The vastness of the sea no longer intimidated him. It was familiar now, his constant companion. And with every passing day, he learned more about its unpredictable nature, its moods, its secrets. Yet, in the quietest moments of dawn, when the first rays of sunlight touched the water, Ezra would sometimes catch a glimpse of something in the distance, something large and dark, moving just beneath the surface. He had never seen it clearly, but he knew, in his heart, that it was a lion. It was as if the creature was always there, just beyond the horizon, a reminder of the wildness that still existed in the world. One night, as Ezra drifted off to sleep under the canopy of stars, he dreamed. In this dream, he was no longer alone on his boat. The lion stood at the bow, its mane ruffled by the wind, its golden eyes watching the horizon with the same quiet intensity he had seen on that first day. The sea was calm, but the air was thick with a sense of an approaching storm. The lion turned to Ezra in the dream, its gaze soft yet piercing. It did not speak, but the message was clear. The lion was not just a symbol of wild freedom. It was a guide, a force that had led him here for a reason. Follow. The lion seemed to say, its powerful form shifting in the dream's mist. Ezra woke with a start, his heart pounding in his chest. The lion had visited him in the dream, as if to tell him that his journey was not yet over. The sea had brought him here, but now it was calling him to something more, something beyond the horizon. With the dream still fresh in his mind, Ezra knew what he had to do. He packed his few belongings into the boat and set sail, not knowing where he was headed, but trusting in the same force that had guided him to the island, to the lion, and back to the sea. This time, there were no maps, no plans, just the promise of adventure, of discovery, of connection to something greater than himself. As the boat cut through the waves, the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the water. Ezra looked ahead, feeling a sense of calm that he had never felt before. There was a freedom in this uncertainty, a peace that came from knowing that he was not alone in the vast expanse of the ocean. The lion spirit was with him, watching over him, guiding him toward the unknown. The night grew deeper, and Ezra sailed on, his boat gliding over the waters like a bird in flight. He didn't know where the ocean would take him, but he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer lost. The sea, with all its mysteries and power, had become his home, and he was part of it now, just as the lion was. In the distance, there was a flicker of light, an island, a place that seemed to rise from the sea itself. Ezra smiled. The adventure was far from over. It was only just beginning. And as he sailed toward the island, he felt the lion's presence once more, not as a physical creature, but as a force of nature, wild, untamed, and free. Ezra was ready.